Paying taxes really sucks. And last year was my first year as a full-time content creator, which after 2 years of not making that much money doing this, I was able to make enough last year to get a 35% tax rate. Which, without telling people the exact amount of money I made, that means I made anywhere between $230,000 and $580,000. And knowing what my tax rate was going to be, I actually spent the last couple months kind of horrified, not even sleeping that well at night, thinking just how much money I was going to have to pay. But then eventually I did my taxes with my accountant, went over everything, and I actually ended up paying less money in taxes than when I was making almost no money, and friends of mine who made less than half of what I did were actually paying more money. And that's because being a content creator and also a homeowner, I was able to get these insane tax deductions. Like $40,000 off in taxes because of the property tax deduction, interest rate deduction, also home office deduction, $12,000 in deductions for trips such as VidCon, and even thousands of dollars in deductions for going out to expensive restaurants like Nobu. All cut from my tax bill largely just because I'm a guy on YouTube. So realizing how many deductions I was able to get and what my tax bill was, I started to wonder, what do YouTubers pay who are much bigger than me? So then I thought about one guy who makes my near million subscriber channel look like a pebble in the beach and wondered what his tax bill actually was. MrBeast! So hey guys, I'm Charles Peralo, and today we're going to figure out what MrBeast owes to Uncle Sam. And looking at the rise of MrBeast, there's really only one comparison I can make for why he's so successful, and that's David Blaine. Where David Blaine in the 2000s became the most famous magician in the world, doing street-side magic on TV, doing a variety of different tricks. And doing so, he was able to beat out these much bigger magicians that had these massive shows in Las Vegas. And his reason for success was explained by fellow magician Penn Jillette, where he explained the reason that David Blaine was so popular was not just because of the trick itself, but because of the reaction to the trick being more entertaining to watch. With Penn Jillette explaining that people just liked actually seeing people freak out to seeing the magic trick, and that's why David Blaine was becoming so popular. And that's basically what MrBeast does, but only with the lottery. Where MrBeast started off as just this kid on YouTube who did 500 videos playing video games that never got any views. He even called them awful and only had 1,000 subscribers.
Look at it. Isn't it beautiful?
But then eventually he started to do bigger things like counting to 100,000 in a video and also saying every word minus the N word in the dictionary. And at a certain point, he was able to reach 1 million subscribers years after starting his channel. But then right around the million subscribers mark, he was offered $5,000 by an app to do a sponsorship. And they had no rules on what it was. They didn't care about the topic. They just said, hey, here's $5,000 to do a video. And MrBeast had the idea of, instead of keeping the money for himself, he would just give away $5,000, but his only condition was it had to be raised to $10,000 because 10,000 sounded cooler than 5,000. And he did that video giving $10,000 to a random homeless person, which ended up getting millions of views, was his most viewed video at the time, and it did make him a big hit. So at that point, he started a new policy where any sponsorships he got, he was going to give away 100% of the money and not pocket any of it for himself. Basically making himself a walking lottery and having the focus of his channel become the reactions to giving away money, which was a very different strategy over other YouTubers, influencers, and content creators who make money and then they buy expensive cars, go on expensive vacations, and don't really live that much of a life that's relatable to people. And that was really the big catalyst for wanting to grow MrBeast's channel, where the idea of subscribing is this chance of one day being featured in a video where they'd have a chance to win a lot of money, and it's basically like a free lottery ticket. Which, doing it was a really successful model that's gotten him over 400 million followers on social media, and doing this whole thing and making millions, he's not actually had to pay $1 in taxes. And explaining US federal tax law, it works like this, where the lowest tax rate is 10%, ranging on income from $0 to $11,000, and then for married people, that's $22,000. And then the highest tax rate is 37% on income over $578,000 or $693,000 for married couples. Doing taxes, there are two very important things to look at, one being deductions and the other one being forming a company. And explaining deductions, they are expensive deemed so necessary to a person or a business's survival that people are able to take them out of their taxes and not owe that money to the government. Which is one personal example being the home I own, where I do have a $24,000 property tax bill every year, and I'm able to deduct $10,000 of that from my federal taxes. And then there's also the interest I have on my mortgage, which comes out to $12,000 a year, and I can deduct that from my income taxes as well. And I'm not saying that's fair to renters or a good policy, but that is the actual law. And then there are actually some really crazy things that are deductible, which are vacations, which could be deemed as work trips. And this is footage of me stripping down into my underwear with a random girl whose name I never bothered to remember at VidCon, and jumping into a swimming pool. And for everyone who just saw that footage, know that because it was a work trip, because it's VidCon, I was actually able to deduct that entire thing from my taxes. And it's also estimated by the IRS that there's over $100 billion in unclaimed deductions that regular people and businesses just don't take advantage of because they don't know about them. And that's just how deductions work. So if someone like MrBeast makes $1 million but then has $370,000 in deductions, he doesn't actually have to pay any taxes. And then there's also another method that people can use to avoid a lot of taxes, which is just forming a company. And this is just something very simple that a YouTuber, a plumber, a person who cuts hair, or anyone else can really do. Where the way it works is when the business is making money, that's revenue, but then any cost related to running that business is an expense, and then the person only pays taxes on the profit, which is what they take away from the business personally. And this is good for YouTubers, but definitely can get a little bit weird, where technically a YouTuber can go out and spend $700 on a dinner, but if they do a 30-second review for their TikTok, that is actually a business expense. And a YouTuber could even do something like buy a Lamborghini, but put it under their company's name and avoid taxes that way while still having a personal luxury. And YouTubers and content creators have such a vague job that anything from travel to luxuries to food can be marked as an expense for some sort of video, so they can really deduct anything. So even though MrBeast's company might have made over $100 million, reinvesting it all means that he might not actually be paying any taxes. So the question is, what does MrBeast actually pay? And to answer the question of what MrBeast pays in taxes, the simple way to put it is if you're a working person paying payroll and income taxes, you're probably paying more money than MrBeast is. And the reason is, even though MrBeast's company is doing over $25 million a month in revenue, he doesn't pay himself much money and reinvest 99.9% of it back into the business. And he does live a pretty modest lifestyle, not having a super expensive home or any assets that he spends much money on personally. And he's very likely paying himself under $100,000 a year, which would mean with deductions he would get for the house, he's probably not paying anything in taxes. And this is definitely not uncommon with the super wealthy, where most of their money is stored in stocks over what they actually make in salary. With one big example being Warren Buffett, who only takes home a salary of $100,000 a year, meaning his income tax rate is actually lower than his secretaries who makes $500,000 a year. And then there's also some CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg who pay themselves $1 a year because all their wealth is with Facebook stock, so the income tax rate is a whopping 10 cents. And this is the case for most billionaires, where 90% or more of their wealth is centered around the companies they started, and if they never cash out, they never actually pay that much money in taxes. So the big question is, should this be legal? And just to make it clear, YouTubers, MrBeast, billionaires, and even scumbags like myself are paying taxes properly, where the US tax code does have 6,871 pages filled with a lot of loopholes, meaning people like me can figure out ways to not pay as much as taxes legally. And question if this is a good or bad thing, it really just comes down to a game of opinion, where people have to ask themselves who spends money better, the federal government or someone like MrBeast. And personal view on this, I consider myself a moderate libertarian, and I don't think the federal government spends money particularly well. Where something like the Iraq war cost $1.9 trillion and 18% of the government's money goes to the military, which I don't think is a very effective use of funds. And then when doing something like driving to the gym, I'll see a highway filled with potholes, and then see the government also spend $30 million on some weird roundabout project and not actually fix the projects they started. And obviously there are some important functions to government, but there is clearly a lot of waste going on that I'd like to see addressed first before raising anyone's taxes. And that's why I'm happy someone like MrBeast exists, who's getting famous, giving away money, building companies, launching new brands, instead of just giving away money to the government. And there definitely are some weird problems when it comes to our tax law, but some politicians have proposed fixes on it, like Senator Rand Paul, where when he ran for president in 2016, he did propose the flat tax.
Well, you've got that right. The city is overrun with lobbyists, and they don't want a flat tax. They want to manipulate the system to help their customers.
Where his plan was to wipe out the payroll tax and not have people pay any taxes on the first $50,000 of income, but then on income after the $50,000 mark, they'd be paying 15% no matter what. The CBO did look at that, saying it was revenue neutral with the current tax policy, where people who were lower income were paying less money and also would save $300 billion in accountant fees per year. And knowing that the tax code is so complex that Americans are spending $300 to $400 billion every year on accountants really does open up people's eyes. And just seeing how things work personally, I think I'd be much happier with a lower rate versus a very high rate where I have to do things like go to VidCon or go to Nobu and be able to get some weird deductions. And if we did have a flat tax, it really wouldn't impact someone like MrBeast at all, where their business would still be able to grow. But that's just an opinion, and with that, I'm Charles Peralo. Subscribe if you learned something.